everyone, Therese here. Welcome to this week's Karma Cards. All right, so we've got some big energy coming up in the following week, and I want to start with one of the coolest alignments that's happening on April 12th. Jupiter and Neptune will be in conjunction in the sign of Pisces. And why this is cool is that it's the first and only time we're going to experience this conjunction in our present lifetime. The last time that Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct was 1856. So Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and whenever it joins with another planet, it helps expand on the themes related to that planet. So both having Jupiter in Pisces and Neptune in Pisces. Neptune is the planetary ruler of the sign of Pisces. So we're talking about dreams, we're talking about the subconscious mind, mysticism, psychic impressions, all of that really esoteric energy is connected to Neptune. And Jupiter is going to help us expand it and deepen it within ourselves. So themes about faith, about understanding the nature of divine spirituality, even how abundance works in our lives is going to become more of a focus and more expanded. So it's a really beautiful energy. So one of my favorite astronumerologists, her name's Tanya Gabrielle. You can find her here on YouTube as well. So shout out to Tanya Gabrielle. But what I loved about what she said about this conjunction is that Neptune offers us the possibility of falling in love with what we see and moving out of judgment. And when you add Jupiter's expanding optimistic energy, it's even easier to start falling in love with what you're seeing. Otherwise, the consequence of not expanding with this energy is to actually move into a deeper sense of criticism and judgment. So we have this beautiful period of grace. And again, just to point out, free will is a universal law. So even with the planets expanding and saying, hey, this is the cosmic direction, we still have the ability to opt out. Life feels harder when we do, but we have the ability to opt out. So let's opt into this energy because, again, it's an energy of loving expansion. It's being able to actually fall in love with the challenges that are in front of you, whatever they are. It's starting to see that this isn't a challenge that's meant to take you down or minimize your energy, but rather provide you with an opportunity. And what happens to us when we don't see the challenge in front of us as a gift is that we start to become pretty judgmental about the experience we're going through. And unfortunately, with that judgment comes harsh criticism, and it's usually inwardly directed. So we start to beat ourselves up or punish ourselves for not understanding how to navigate the challenge in front of us. And that actually brings me to this week's topic, which I can't wait to get into. But before I forget, there's also going to be a full moon in Libra coming up on April 16th. It's on a Saturday in the US, so I believe that's April 16th. Now I gotta double check. Yes, April 16th in the US, full moon in Libra. So again, what I love about the full moon in Libra, Libra is one of the signs that's ruled by Venus. So again, that's matching this loving energy that's coming through. And Libra is the sign of partnership. It's a sign of balance. And I think that these two events happening within the same week is showing us how to find balance by loving what's in front of us. Some things that are going to appear in our life and in front of us are going to be easy to love, like when people cooperate or when things look like they're working for you, or when you're in a place of acceptance, right? But what happens when we're presented with obstacles or challenges? How are we responding or reacting to those? That's what this opening, this cosmic alignment is drawing our attention to and giving us an opportunity to see things differently. So this week, the message from the team is about understanding your processing, which is actually something that I learned many years ago, but it's actually coming back around for me too. I was in the learning state of processing and I'm moving into the teaching state of processing because this is how it works for all of us. learning and teaching are on a spectrum, so that what we're learning, we end up teaching to someone else. And of course, whatever we're teaching, we learn deeper. So I'm excited to see what my team wants me to learn more about processing while I help share it with you. So let me go into the backstory about processing. Emotional processing is specifically what I'm talking about, although sometimes processing can just include mentally being able to process what's going on. What I want to talk about is processing time, because years ago, I didn't understand this concept. I wasn't aware of processing time. And after 2012, that's when it started to come into my awareness, and I was able to then watch my own growth journey when it comes to processing. So I want to share this with you because there's a lot to process in life, right? We have a lot more to process maybe now than we did 3 years ago, right? So there's a lot more to take in, many more levels, and it's only going to become more opportunistic. There's only going to become more opportunities for processing. I think there's a lot of stuff as we're moving through this transition. So remember, we're in a cycle that's ending and a new cycle that's about to begin. We're naturally going to have a lot of processing to do. And so I want to talk about that because, again, before 2012, I didn't have any awareness of processing time in me. And because of that, I used to fall into the trap of self-pity, which is what happens when we don't realize that we can end processing. So when you find something that you're working through, let's say you're working on developing an aspect of yourself, or you're trying to grow to your next level. So this can be any type of growth. It can be physical growth, it can be mental growth, emotional growth, spiritual growth. It works in every area, and you're going to end up having to process something as you're asking yourself to move forward. Before I understood what processing was, I tended to stay with an emotion, and it was like I was invited to a party. That's the awareness. Hey, I have an emotion, and here's my awareness of it. And I was like the house guest who never got the message that the party was over. Okay, so my processing took long periods of time. And I remember, being called out by family on some things about stop wallowing. I heard that a lot. And I didn't understand it. Like, I understand they wanted me to stop feeling what I'm feeling, but I didn't understand the idea that I'm wallowing because I'm still feeling it. Does that make sense? So if you are empathic, if you are a very sensitive, emotional soul, it can be easy to continually feel what you are feeling. It's almost like it self-regenerates inside of you. And the more attention you give it, the more it's going to regenerate, right? And that's the processing period where you're like, oh my gosh, I just identified this emotion I had when I was 5 and where it came from, and now I'm feeling it again, and we get sucked back in. And that's I have to process this. I didn't fully feel it then, so now I need to go into the cycle and feel it. Well, that part's healthy, right? Acknowledging that you have an unresolved feeling or something that hasn't been brought to consciousness, it is so important to allow yourself to go in and begin the process, because that's where healing starts. And there is a point at which we've probably done the work, and if we're not aware of our processing time, then we can stay there almost indefinitely. And it doesn't help when you're empathic and someone else has a similar or resonant frequency going on and you start feeling it, but you have a hard time identifying, is that their stuff or is it mine? Because it is their stuff and your stuff might still be going on. So you can see how the process gets really watery and messy if you're not aware of, I take this long to process. So fast forward 2012, I start doing more personal development work and I start understanding the idea of processing time. That means when something gets brought to my consciousness, how long does it take me to move through it? And when I realized that there is like a natural period of time to process something, then I started to become aware of how long things took me to process. And the heavier things, would take, honestly, again, very sensitive and emotional, could take me a couple months to process. Over time, as I started to realize that I'm not at the whim of this emotion is not in charge, I'm in charge, right? And that I can see that I've worked through every angle, I've seen it from every position I can see it, and I am ready to let it go. I'm like making a conscious choice that I can let this go, I can let it resolve and move forward. That window naturally, just as I was doing it, so it wasn't about forcing it wasn't like, that takes me 3 months, I need to get that down to a week. That's not how it worked. It was the willingness to move through the cycle and not try to hold on. Because that's what happens. There's a trap inside the processing where it does feel good to let yourself feel it. And if you're a person who grew up where people were emotionally suppressing you, like telling you you're too dramatic, you're being too sensitive, we're always getting that message to tone it down. So if you grew up with that and then you're finally letting yourself feel, there is a very gray area between feeling what you feel and then moving into a place where that's all you're feeling, right? You never actually move forward because you're still identifying with that processing energy. So it's important to allow yourself to realize that there is, every cycle has its natural resolution so that a new cycle can begin. And when you just have that hint of awareness that this actually doesn't last forever, it does resolve, then what happens is you actually allow yourself to start processing faster. And so the question I have for you today is, if this is hitting you, if it's the first time that you are aware of processing, how long does it feel like it takes you to process something? And if you are aware that you're processing, how long do you give yourself to process? I mean, and again, it's not like the same, it's not a cookie cutter process. So not every experience will be, it takes me a day. Some experiences are bigger or heavier, and they're going to take longer to unpack. Some are going to be less consequential, and they're going to unpack fairly easily. I mean, there are some things where I can process it, and if I have any emotions to work through, it can be resolved under 20 minutes, where there are some things that take me a day. And then there are some things where I'm like, I'm giving myself an entire month off to let this unfold itself so I can understand it better. So again, processing doesn't necessarily mean that it takes you the same amount of time to move through every type of process. So then the next question I have for you is, as you're aware of processing, have you ever found yourself getting caught up in the process? It's an interesting combo, because there is a relief to it, because I understand something I didn't understand before. So we're experiencing the joy of relief, and then underneath that joy of relief, there is a temptation to start identifying. I'm going to identify this way. For example, if I recognize that I've been suffering from a self-limiting belief of I'm not enough, and you feel that resonance move through your body, you're like, oh, it feels so good to understand what the block is. But then we take that joy, that dopamine hit of understanding, and we start to connect it to, I am a person who feels like she's not enough, or I'm an insecure person, or whatever it is. We take that beautiful crystalline awareness and we start attaching it. The ego does this. I just want to clarify. It's not higher consciousness. It's not the more aware part of you. It's our ego. It's like, ooh, that felt good. And that also serves my ego's agenda of keeping me separated. So I'm going to attach to this now. And that's where we cross from processing into attachment, into, if you want to call it wallowing or staying with the emotion. We stay static with it because it becomes how we self-identify. I don't feel good enough about myself, right? And then we start identifying that. And then anytime we try to grow past that, that becomes the new limit. So if you see yourself as a person who's a workaholic, and you've identified it, you feel really proud of yourself. I understand this. I got the crystalline connection of understanding about where, what was holding me back or what was holding me in a pattern. But now my ego is attached to that identity as a workaholic. So you might think of yourself as somebody who's working through being a workaholic, but you're still attaching. Do you see how the ego still attaches to that identification of workaholic? Then when someone's like, why don't you practice letting go and relaxing more? It becomes a self-limiting belief, because the identity is I'm a workaholic in progress, or I'm working through being a workaholic. We want to learn how to drop the identifier as we are processing the emotions, the growth, and the self-understanding. It's really interesting that our ego always wants to get in there and attach. It wants to put us in a box. It wants to put a label on it and tell you, well, this is what you are now. Or I'm a workaholic, or, right, I am always busy. I'm a little busy bee, or I'm overgiving. But then you keep saying it, and everything we're thinking and saying is anchoring us into that energetic. So what I want to give you today, before we do the karma cards, is just an understanding of how we can start the processing in a more conscious way, where we're not attaching to what we're finding. We're letting ourselves feel it, but trying to do so from a more neutral place in ourselves, so that once we've identified it, once we've felt it, once we allowed ourselves time to sit with it, we can then say, I've transcended that. I can move through and out of this, and I can let this go now, rather than constantly having it brought up every time you try to expand yourself. So the first part, when you're dealing with processing this self-limiting belief, is to, of course, acknowledge it. So we can't process, we can't transmute or transform anything that we won't hold. Right? So if we're feeling like a workaholic, if I feel like that, then it's like I have worked myself more than I needed to. And what feeling comes up from that? That's the, tapping in there, putting your hand on your heart, and how am I feeling around this? And then you're going to get the emotional response. Then you're moving into asking this part, what does it need? What do you need to feel healed, to feel understood, or to move into a place of integration with me, where we're no longer identifying as that, but rather seeing that that was a path we took, maybe to protect ourselves, maybe because it was the path we believed we had to take, but we're recognizing it's a path, it's not me. Once you've asked this part of you, what you're trying to process, what does it need, intend to give it to yourself the best you can. For example, sometimes I've heard from parts of me that I need a hug from so-and-so. Well, that's not necessarily something I can control. I can go ask so-and-so for a hug, but if so-and-so's not in the mood or not available, I cannot control that. And therefore, there's sort of this sort of opening, a heavy pause inside, like I'm waiting, like where's my hug, right? So when you get some kind of response that you feel like that's not something I'm capable of doing on my own, that requires something or someone else, then intend that for yourself. I intend you to feel held and supported and hugged. May you get your hug, right? So you're not sitting there promising something you can't deliver, but you're holding the space that happens. And many times there is an internal response to that, like, I am satisfied, or thank you for holding that for me. Thank you for holding it consciously for me. The next part, once you've gotten all this down, is ask yourself, am I done processing this? Is this resolved? After you've intended to give yourself what you need, is this resolved? You might hear, yeah, I feel better now. I can let this go. You may hear, nope, still in pain, still struggling, still don't want to do it. If that's the case, and so, I would say, like, depending on the thing I'm processing, many times I get no. I'm not done. And so I have an agreement with myself. This is how it works for me. It might work this way for you. You might have to find your own way into it. But here's an example. So when I hear, nope, I'm not done yet, I already can sense how long it's going to take me only because of my years of being aware of processing. But here's what I'll do is I'll say to myself, if I give you it the rest of the day, will that feel like enough time to process this? In most cases, yes. In most cases, I feel a sense of deep calm when I hear I have permission to continue staying in this state for the rest of the day. It's very rare that I go to bed and I'm like, nope, I'm not done with this yet. Other times I've heard that a day is not enough, that I need to take the rest of the week off. In very rare occasions lately, I've heard like I need a full month away from this. Like I'm putting this all the way down and I'm not coming back to it until I've had a 30 days of space. So it's important to ask yourself, how long do you need to process this? You'll always get an answer. And the beautiful thing is, if you are asking yourself, then you're no longer bullying yourself into doing it because it's got to be now or never. Like, get over it. That's what caused the emotional trauma in the background in the first place. That's what created the issue. And our protection response to it is when we felt like we couldn't process this. So it's not about forcing yourself to move quicker through something. It's rather asking yourself, when will it be enough? When will you feel like you've had enough time to move through this? And honestly, it's almost like when you have that permission, when you're giving yourself that permission, you'll be surprised that it's not as long as you're maybe afraid it will be. Because I think sometimes what happens is people don't realize they can ask of themselves, like, how much do you need here? Right? It's not a question from a place of impatience or pushing. It's a question from a place of allowing, because I'm going to give you what you're asking for. And many times I think the inner child or whatever aspect of ourself that's responding is like, whoa, really? Like I can have the rest of the day? Yeah, okay. It takes me all day. I want it all the way till the end of the day. It's like, great, it's yours. And there's always a time though where it's like after that, there's this nice resolution. Like you just feel everything. The nervous system comes down, everything starts to stabilize and ground, and you realize, or that part might realize, you know what, I think I'm done. I think I've worked it out. There are other times where it's like, I need this space held for me for a certain amount of time, and then you slowly start to feel it subside. So it's really about being self-led and having an understanding that whatever you're going through, so whenever you're going through those moments of feeling exposed and vulnerable, when you're trying to grow and you're feeling the internal resistance, it's not about controlling yourself. It's not about force, and it's not about being so demanding of yourself that you are literally causing the internal trauma to start all over again. Rather, it's an awareness that this too will pass, and I have the ability to transcend this by working with this energy versus against this energy. So I hope this conversation helps you feel more connected to the parts of you that are in resistance, and understanding that there is some processing that's trying to happen here, and that just because you're processing doesn't mean that you're not going to move through the next layer of growth and expansion. In fact, when you're processing, it's a sign that you're doing it, right? Those are maybe the growing pains, but you can celebrate, oh my gosh, something is hitting, it's coming in deeper, and my awareness is opening because of it. I'm having response to it. And with that, let's do some karma cards. All right, if you're new to karma cards, let me quickly show you how these work. I have 3 decks here: planets, signs of the zodiac, and the houses of astrology. And I've already asked my team, what is the message you have for us this week? And I've got two sets of answers, one in red, which are action related, and a set in blue, which are outcome related. And the way that you play is you tune in with your intuition and you feel whether you need action related guidance or if you're looking for outcome related guidance. And you can always choose both. While you are choosing, let me share with you the timing for this reading. This reading is for April 8th through April 16th with the full moon. Right, and the flavor of this reading is so cool. We've got Jupiter, which was the planet we were talking about earlier that's going to be conjunct with Neptune in the sign of Aries, which is the current season that we are in the fourth house, which has to do with our past and dealing with our family base and roots. So this will be really interesting. Right, so for those who are choosing action, your spiritual action is learn or teach your willpower as you did in the past. That's really interesting. It's kind of connected to what we're talking about. Willpower is an interesting one. Willpower is an interesting one because our will represents that directed life force energy, and power obviously is the radiant energy itself. I just talked about learn or teaching, about processing your willpower as you did in the past. I do think that we're going to come into a new understanding with willpower. I honestly think that we have an old paradigm understanding of what willpower is. And again, it was more based on forcing, like we're white knuckling our way into doing what we're going to do. Where your will represents your desire. This is what I want. And so desire power, right? I desire to grow. I desire to expand. I desire to move through this. But we're going to use it in a much more gentle and beneficial way. And I would say that as we did in the past would refer to our early childhood where we were more in tune with what we wanted without judging it, right? So we were in tune with what we wanted. So let's say you want to expand your visibility in the world right now. As a child, you wouldn't judge that. You wouldn't put anything on top of it, that this means that you are narcissistic or it means that you are selfish or want attention. We wouldn't do that. We were just like, I just want to be seen. Like it was such a pure state of being. And so I feel like part of this is to relearn how to get in touch with your desire and empower it without forcing it, without deciding things about it and making yourself bad or wrong for wanting more than what you're receiving in your life. You can want more and still be grateful and content, but understand that wanting more is directly connected to expansion, which is what we do. That's just what energy does. That's what the universe is doing. It's constantly expanding. So to be in a place of trying to repress or deny that, it's going to cause suffering. So it's just simply, it says learn or teach, but I almost feel like when you add the past to it, it's more like a remembering or a relearning. Mental action at this time. Be positive about what you think you know about your home base or family. All right, so this message I like too, and I'm going to phrase this in a way that I heard Brene Brown say years ago, and it just clicked, it resonated, and I use it as an anchor in my own thoughts. And I have to work on it all the time. Like we work on, there's things that resonate for us, but we still have to work on it. This particular phrase was, be generous in your thoughts with others. And that's really what this is saying, but it's pointing at your home base or your family. So the people currently around you or the people you came from. And as we are processing things that we're like trying to understand and move through, we're going to think about things from the past. It's going to involve people in our past, and we're going to remember when we were told to calm down, or we were told to stop being so whiny or emotional or whatever it was, right? That this person said this. And instantly, as we're processing it, there's an impulse to judge. Like, how could you be so mean? How could you be so belittling or cruel? That's how we felt. That's part of what you're holding on to emotionally, right? To be generous in our thoughts with others is to tell a different story. So if you can't get the direct story from the person in the thing you're processing, and most times we don't, right? If you've ever tried, you're probably going to be met with some kind of defensiveness unless that person has done a lot of personal growth as well. For the most part, when we're processing and we're bringing up things from the past, we're going to be doing this sort of alone. And it's very easy to become, it's like you take that feeling of being suppressed and it becomes sort of a frustration or even anger. And then it wants to direct at the person that you're experiencing that suppression from. So what happens is we tell ourselves a story in our head of how cruel that experience was. And it becomes what's the opposite of generous? It becomes a miserly thought. It becomes a limiting thought. There it is. It becomes a limiting thought about that person, and it's easy to then project, right? Project it. So to be generous in our thoughts is to, again, find our compassion, put ourselves in their shoes and say, if that was the best you could do, what the heck was going on for you that shutting me down felt like the best thing to do? And usually what you'll hear is like, they were probably really overwhelmed. It was a really stressful situation. They weren't processing or handling. They hadn't gone through that self-awareness work. And you'll feel your heart soften towards that person instead of feeling the anger. And then you might still feel anger, and that's okay, by the way. But instead of staying there, when you're generous in your thoughts with others, you literally are better at letting go. You no longer hold on to resentment, and you no longer harbor the energy inside of yourself that you're trying to process. So when we're in judgment of others and we're suffering mentally from the pain we went through, and then we try to process and that pain just keeps coming up, and then our thoughts tighten around that person, it keeps us in this place. We're harboring the energy now. It's all happening inside of us now. And that's what can keep us sort of in a spin or a wallow, because then we're constantly being re-hurt, except we don't realize we're the ones hurting ourselves now. That the original pain is over and now it's suffering, right? It's that story that we tell. So when we can move into generosity in our thoughts, it helps us get out of the story. We're telling a new story, because we don't actually know unless we ask the other person, we don't actually know what was going on. So we have choices to make. We can choose to get involved in the hurt, or we can choose to see, like, if I'm generous in my thought about this person, what was going on there that you thought that was the best choice? And with that story, we start to feel the ease and relaxation. We start to process the feelings that are allowing us to move out of it instead of deeper into it. Physical action at this time. Grow and expand, do it your own way, and do what makes you feel secure. So hearing that, I just want to point out that all of this information I'm giving you today isn't telling you how to do it, because I wouldn't assume that my process works better than yours. I simply want to share with you what I've learned about processing and how I'm able to continually move forward, even though I've dealt with some big, heavy emotions. And even though I came from a past experience of really being able to hang on to an emotional state and stay there for quite a long time. Like, I was epic in my ability to sort of stay put. I have to laugh only because it's like, it's so far from who I perceive myself to be today. But I have friends and family who can attest that I was good at holding a grudge. When I got my teeth into something, I could stay there, but I was miserable at it, even though there was this weird sort of sense of like, I'm really good at this. Looking back, I'm like, why would you want to be good at that? Like, that's just not... It's not something I aspire to now. So what I want to say is, my hope here is that I'm showing you what processing looks like and how you can move through it in a faster way that maybe you currently are. But it should be your process. And it should always come from this place of being gentle with yourself, that you do deserve to finish processing. And that if you're respectful with yourself and ask yourself, how long do you need? What you'll find is that even the most emotional part of yourself can be pretty reasonable if it feels like it's being heard. And so that's the space I'm hoping to help you create. Right, so now let's go to outcomes in Jupiter in Aries in the 4th house of the past. Your spiritual outcome at this time is the granting of energies to meet the challenge of what makes you feel secure. So we're going to be given the energy to meet this challenge of processing, of moving through those heavier emotional states so that we can move to feeling secure. Because you can feel that if you're stuck in, I'm still feeling this, if you're still feeling lower emotion, it doesn't feel like a secure place to be. If you feel like I can't do this and you're trying to do something on the other side of that feeling, if you stay here, you're not going to feel secure about doing the thing, right? So what they're saying is, like, listen, just by being willing to show up and ask yourself, what do I need to help myself move through this? And how much time would I like to move through this? That is like a beautiful blessing on yourself that gives you the energy to do it. On the other side of that is that sense of security in yourself. Mental outcome at this time, blessings from your desires regarding support. So as this is an act of self-support, processing and asking yourself how much time do I need to move through this is a beautiful act of support. And it is literally holding 2 states at once. It's holding your desire for where you're trying to go and holding with love what part of you is resisting it. It's like, oh, not everybody's on board with where I'm trying to go. Okay. What do we need? What are you feeling? What would you like? How long do you need to process this? So you see, you're holding 2. You're not sacrificing one for the other. And by doing that, you're going to feel blessed. You're going to feel that you're moving through something. And you're going to give yourself the opportunity to witness how quickly you can move through something if you give yourself permission. Physical outcome at this time, good fortune resulting from the honesty and strength of your home base or family. All right, so the home base or family, the honesty and strength of your home base and family. Now, even though this card does talk about our physical family and our physical our physical past, it's also talking about the internal state. So when I see this image right here, this looks a lot like what I see when I look at the heart chakra. So I see like this beautiful temple in the center, and I see this, what I call the courtyard on the outside, and all these paths leading in. My vision's slightly different, but it's very representative of this is home base. All right, so your heart, that's the center of your heart, is your home base. It is a sacred center. It is the space that was created. The very first thing that was created in your physical body was this space. It's pretty amazing to think about. So it's saying good fortune resulting from the honesty and strength of home base, your home base. So when we're holding that space for ourselves, when we're allowing ourselves to processing by recognizing how we're feeling, asking ourselves, what do we need in this moment? How long do I need to process this? All of these things are getting to your core truth. It's not, I don't have time for this anymore. Get over it, right? It's not, this is so frustrating. Why am I here again? It's none of that. It's all about acknowledgement, honesty, truth, and integrity of asking yourself what you need and intending to give it to yourself. So it's, again, I love it when Jupiter shows up because it's such positive energy. And it's simply saying by doing this work, you are blessing your own energy. You are going to start feeling the union, the merging of different aspects of self coming together as your conscious awareness holds those different aspects and their opinion about how you're moving through life. There's parts of you who are in agreement, there's parts of you who are not, and each part should get some airtime. It should get some love and respect from you. And by doing that, you are blessing your home base, you're blessing your heart, you're blessing your energy, you're blessing your life, and you're creating blessings for those around you because you are a blessing to be around. And with that, I'm sending you so much love for this week. Mwah! Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so that you know the next time I release a new video. Until then, stay magical.